The early days of the week pass like a lake surface lashed by wind, rippling yet never allowing anyone to see the bottom. The air at Fairmont Crest is dense with vague promises, cold handshakes, and glances that measure one another in silence. In that tableau, Danny enters a familiar room with the posture of someone who has had enough of half-hearted caresses and the scratches left by hope. She looks back at the road she has traveled with Bill, a string of delayed choices, hairline fractures where pride and ambition collided, long nights in which she reminded herself that love can be a source of strength or a lever around the throat, depending on whether the one who holds it uses it to build or to break. The last conversation burns away the thin smoke that had blurred her eyes, exposing the place where Bill stands, no longer shifting, no longer sliding up and down the rungs of emotion, no longer hiding behind inexplicable reasons. Clarity should be liberating, yet for Danny it shoots a different spark, igniting the tender parts she tried to preserve. She does not feel lighter, she feels heavier, because clarity means there is no excuse to wait, no excuse to postpone the truth that if Bill now stands on the far side of the line, all the gentleness before abruptly turns into evidence against her. The question is no longer whom Bill will choose, but what Danny will do with the self-respect pushed to the edge. With the bridge of honor she must either cross or burn so she cannot turn back. Elsewhere, Jacob steps out from the shell of a man good at enduring alone to admit that some knots cannot be untied by oneself. He knows exactly where to knock, not because that door is easy but because it holds the tools he lacks, whether legal leverage, medical knowledge, or a social network wide enough to send a message and bring back an answer before everything passes the point of rescue. Seeking help is not weakness but a strategic decision, and yet Jacob smells the faint reek of failure, the scent of someone who has clenched his jaw for too long and must now concede that human strength has limits. In his mind, the worst-case scenarios parade quietly by: a medical mistake buried in a stack of paperwork, an invisible debt manipulated into a noose, a spliced clip enough to destroy the last currency he owns, his reputation. He pictures the hands that will reach for him, the white-gloved hand of the law and the mud-stained hand of those accustomed to bending the law, and he forces himself to choose the right person, the right moment, the right presentation. If he entrusts the truth to the wrong party, a door will slam and push him forever outside the ritual circle where power is traded like a cold currency. In the narrow hallway between the need to be saved and the fear of betrayal, Jacob keeps his back straight, because he understands that this time it is not just about his own standing but the safety of someone he wants to protect, someone who may not even know she has been placed on the bargaining table. Meanwhile, Haley and Randy fumble before a situation that seems small but can spread like oil on water. From one oversight, one strange call, one file opened in the wrong order, or merely the probing gaze of someone always ready to turn others' stories into personal advantage, the whole foundation they built begins to tremble. They believed they had hidden every pin that could pierce the shells of family and finance, but a single crack can suffice for uninvited hands to slip in. Haley is heavy with all the times she told herself that silence might be the best way through a storm, but silence is also the fertile medium where suspicion sprouts. Randy understands numbers, even how to make them tell a story tailored to a purpose, yet numbers are obedient only until someone with a stronger motive drags them into cross-examination. The danger is not just the substance of the matter but the way it will be retold by those with the podium to name what is right and what is wrong. They drift between the need to defend themselves and the obsession that any defensive move will be interpreted as a confession. When every door seems to lead to some form of loss, they begin to wonder whether they bet on the wrong table, handed the key to someone unworthy, or forgot that gifts too good always come with terms nobody says aloud. Vanessa, more than anyone, understands that true power comes from the ability to put others in a position where they must react. When she holds in her hand an asset Joey considers his most precious, she grips not only material value but the rhythm of the man across from her. She sees impatience in the way he tries to seem calm, watches the muscle in his jaw twitch when legality is mentioned, sees his hand reach for the phone as if the other end of the line could pull him out of the defensive posture. But Vanessa does not hurry, because haste signals an impending loss. She calmly lines the path of public opinion with details convincing enough, sprinkles small morsels into the ears of people who love to gather scraps and weave them into a web larger than reality. She promises nothing, she simply designs a situation in which Joey must face the truth that the one who owns the leverage writes the script. Even so, the quiet when she stands alone behind glass prods an old question: is she rebuilding the very trap that kept her sleepless years ago, merely switching the face of the hunted from herself to someone else? The slide into the dark side never makes a sound. It only makes reasonable choices feel so comfortable that one forgets to ask about the price to be paid when everything is over. Andre walks the edge of another line, where loyalty, fear, and the need to be understood pull together into a tightening loop. He faces Pamela as if confronting a thick mirror, reflecting not only his current self but all the days he pushed things to the bottom of memory and covered them with urgencies. Things never spoken to his wife can lie still like stones under water until a cold wind named danger ruffles the surface and reveals the shark shapes of secrets. Pamela is not a court, but she is a fire test, because the truth spoken to her could save a major deal or burn down the freshly built bridge. Andre weighs a confession that might help him staunch a wound now against the cost of losing a kind of trust one cannot purchase anywhere. He knows speaking early to someone who was not his wife is lighting the fuse of suspicion, yet speaking only after the explosion is gambling his family in the circus of public opinion. Is there any decision that does not stain the hands? Is there any road to peace that does not cross a minefield of preconceptions? Andre understands that each minute of hesitation is another minute for outsiders to rewrite the story in a direction he will spend years trying to correct. The tension of all threads intersects like a storm-shaken grid of wires. A phony message could make Danny misread a context, a skewed photo could shove Jacob into an investigation with no end date, a misaligned invoice could force Haley and Randy to open their books to eyes that once swore they would never look, a double-edged maneuver could swap Joey from holder of power to its supplicant, and a sentence spoken without weighing its mass could turn Andre from anchor into suspect. Fairmont Crest is used to deals where smiles serve as varnish, but this is when the varnish cracks, exposing the rot and old joinery beneath. Hidden forces stir the water, hoping each character chooses a particular slope to slide down, because at the bottom of every slope, someone waits to sweep up the fragments, measure them, and sell them to the highest bidder. Within that current, Danny coils like a compressed spring, reminding herself that feelings must be priced by their owner and cannot be paid for by others. She retraces the times she chose patience, the nights she chose silence, and now, with Bill's position no longer ambiguous, she must decide whether to build another story on trembling footings or flatten everything to preserve a plot of ground for a new structure. She knows today's decision will be interpreted tomorrow, and she cannot control how people narrate her, but she can control refusing to let anyone use gray zones as their convenience. The anger inside her does not explode. It saturates like rain-soaking stone, heavy yet certain, pushing her closer to the point of no return. Will she set conditions that force Bill to pay in actions rather than promises, or will she leave the table and the chair empty as a declaration that no one has the right to hang her love from the ceiling like a decoration? After a long night of calculating risk, Jacob begins to list the names he can trust, the documents to include, the facts strong enough to resist the familiar techniques of distortion in closed conference rooms. Each line he writes is a slice cutting the belief that gritting one's teeth is noble. He knows ahead lies a matrix of questions and polite yet hollow smiles, where any answer can be bent if it is not splinted by a hard layer of proof. He wonders who will stand with him when the tide rises, who will pull a foot back when the mud sucks too fast, and whether the call he is about to make will open a door of relief or a black hole that warps everything he is trying to hold. Even so, he presses the button, because sometimes the most frightening thing is doing the right thing, as doing right means there is nowhere to hide when truth touches skin. Haley and Randy sit before pages where every line can become a preset trap. They agree there is no peace for free, especially in an ecosystem where another's failure is someone else's success. They check each item, choose what can be brought to light, what must be locked in a safe, what requires a trusted third party to attest. Even so, the feeling of being watched screeches like metal scraping metal in their minds, reminding them that any step could be exposed in a way they cannot control. They are forced to imagine who will throw the first stone if their story is laid bare, and whether they have enough stones to throw back. Worse, they realize that somewhere, someone has scripted them as side characters in a larger game, and unless they resist, they will be shoved into the villains of their own tale. Joey senses Vanessa's pressure the way a violinist hears a string reach the high, taut note. He understands that the opponent need not shout, she need only drop the right details at the right time to create a silence that speaks. He asks himself what move can reclaim initiative, a grand promise, a three-way deal, or a counterstrike using the very public sentiment Vanessa has been grooming. Yet each option carries the shadow of risk, because when someone else keeps the key, all his steps can be recast as desperation. He stands between tossing everything into a final gamble and conceding a step back to keep a peace for the next round. The trouble is, in a world where rumor outruns truth, a retreat can look like a collapse, and silence can be nailed up as a confession. Andre ends the day by comparing two maps in his head. One leads to immediate safety at the price of long-term trust, and one leads to the possibility of explosion while preserving the integrity of chronology when all is revealed. He asks whether he is so afraid of an imagined storm that he keeps building more roofing without noticing the pillars have rotted. Anger at himself for letting it come to this, anger at a world that rewards shortcuts, anger at unseen hands always ready to pull strings. These merge into a roaring in his ears, louder than any other noise. Inside that roar, he must decide who will hear the truth first, and whether the choice will turn the woman he loves into someone placed before a fait accompli. When night folds over Fairmont Crest like a heavy blanket, each character holds a small secret whose weight is greater than expected. Dani clutches her pride like a fragile shield, bracing for the blows delivered by tomorrow's commentary. Jacob puts the documents in the proper order, preparing to enter a space where every gaze is a measuring instrument, where time is counted by patience with repeated questions. Haley and Randy smother the tremor in their hands by changing the rhythm of their breathing, accepting that dawn is also the moment they must open a door they have long kept only ajar. Vanessa sets down her phone as one would place a black piece on a white square, knowing the next move will force Joey to expose what he tried to hide. Andre sits alone in the dark, listening to the clock tick like the tempo of a slow interrogation, and understands that each passing second diminishes the supply of decent options. In that silence, questions hang like uninsulated wires. Will Dani turn clarity into leverage or into the fire that burns the bridge? Is Jacob asking the right ally, or has he unwittingly added a new link to the chain already looped around his neck? Is the fragile situation of Haley and Randy a scrape that can be bandaged, or a door left ajar for hungry beasts to slip through? Is Vanessa writing a new fate for herself, or reenacting the loop that once brought her to her knees? Does Joey have the patience not to yank the cord even as it tightens, or will haste reduce him to a pawn? Will Andre dare to tell the truth in its proper order, or will he let the yardstick of goodwill slip from his hand at the last minute? Above all, are the interlaced struggles and schemes drawing a new line between right and wrong, or merely expanding the gray zone where everyone believes they act for justice? No one knows, but everyone understands one thing: at Fairmont Crest, the moment you realize you have been backed to the wall is the moment a layer of human skin peels back to expose the animal beneath, and once that animal speaks, the decisions that follow rarely remain gentle.